The Trickster has been an underpowered ascendancy for quite a while now. Historically, this ascendancy was the go-to ascendancy for damage over time classes. You have to think about builds like Toxic Rain, things like Essence Drain Contagion. These were builds that were iconic on the Trickster. It used to be one of the most popular ascendancies in the game, but these days it's fallen completely to the wayside, being probably the least played ascendancy that there is. And the new Trickster rework is going to be giving this ascendancy a massive overhaul. This ascendancy is no longer the damage over time ascendancy. The ascendancy now is themed around energy shield, evasion, and speed. And although all of the new nodes on the Trickster are thematic and powerful, I am a bit hesitant to be jumping into this right away. Now, I've been super excited for a Trickster rework for a long time. This was one of my favorite ascendancies in the game, and I like a lot of the new points. We're going to talk in depth about a lot of the new points. My concerns about doing stuff with this right away, but my thoughts on that, this will probably be a very powerful ascendancy once we actually figure it out. Now remember, boys, if you're enjoying this content, make sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest videos. And without further ado, let's get into it. So now, before we go more in depth on the overall view that I have of Trickster, I'm going to go through these nodes one by one, talk about my thoughts, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether I think people will take it. And let's start at Heartstopper. Now, Heartstopper was added into the game previously, but it was you stop taking damage over the time 50% of the time. And that at least had some kind of interesting mechanics with things like Leath Shade and such. The new Heartstopper is interesting, and I think on average will reduce damage by more. But one problem that a lot of things in Path of Exile have when it comes to defenses is that they are inconsistent. And this, unfortunately, is an inconsistent ascendancy point. So you've got take 40% less damage from hits for 5 seconds, and then afterwards, take 40% less damage over time for 5 seconds. So for 5 seconds, you'll have less damage from hits, and then the next 5 seconds, you'll have less damage from damage over time, and they are consecutive and they repeat. The issue here is that in Path of Exile, 5 seconds is a long time. You can die from absolutely full health in under half a second in Path of Exile. So my worry here is that while these are very powerful numbers, it reminds me a lot of the Elementalist node, where you kind of just swing back and forth between different effects, and how having occasional effects that do things sometimes just isn't as good as having a lesser effect consistently. I don't know how good this will be. There might be some builds that will take this if they can't utilize everything else, but I think this is still one of the weaker nodes here just because it's going to be inconsistent. And then moving over to Polymath. So Polymath is the only real, you do more damage and a large amount of it node on the entirety of the Ascendancy. There are the other Ascendancy points that give little bits of damage, but they're not as significant as what Polymath can be. Now, notably, I think that the new Trickster Ascendancy is missing a tiny bit of damage, but I'll talk about that more when we're over at the bottom right side. The idea behind Polymath is that this is attempting to get you to take a lot of different masteries. And the reason why Polymath is a little bit worrisome is because it is very heavily dependent on taking a bunch of different masteries. Now, there are going to be some builds that are pretty good about this. You know, you'll be taking an aura mastery and a life mastery and maybe a mana mastery, an evasion mastery, an armor mastery. You will get a decent amount of these, right? Most builds are going to get 5 to 10. So this is a pretty good amount of damage. But you do have to build around that. You have to actually go for these masteries. If it is a build that doesn't really take a lot of different kinds of masteries, this isn't going to be as powerful, and it is one of the only main damage nodes of the Ascendancy. You do need to keep that in mind. However, if you can make use of this Ascendancy point, it is very powerful. If you are able to push upwards towards 10 masteries, you are getting 30% more damage, you are getting 10% of life, 10% of energy shield, and 10% of mana on every single kill. That is enough to sustain you pretty much completely while mapping. You don't need any other form of recovery while you're clearing stuff. So this is a very potentially powerful Ascendancy, a ridiculously powerful potential, but you really are going to have to make sure that you get those masteries invested in. Moving down to Swift Killer, one of the big things about this notable in comparison to a lot of other things that are available in the game is that while +2 maximum frenzy charges is good, don't get me wrong here, the 200% increased charge duration is interesting because that enables a lot of those, if you remember the implicits that you can get through the Eldritch mods that say you gain a charge every so-and-so seconds, this enables those to essentially be permanent uptime on whatever charges you put there. So this is opening up some options for charge generation in that regard, particularly. I know a lot of people are probably going to be upset that it doesn't have the charge generation from before, but there are ways now that you can invest without extreme investment into getting some charge generation in different circumstances here. So Swift Killer is pretty good, and I mean, +2 maximum frenzy charges is really solid. That's a decent amount of damage, decent amount of attack speed, cast speed, all that kind of good stuff. Now, one step ahead is one of the more interesting nodes out of the entirety of all the nodes here, I feel. One step ahead is your action speed is at least 108 of base value. Keep in mind that action speed is like a more multiplier on all of your speeds. We're talking like attack speed, cast speed, movement speed. So you always have at least 108, and then nearby enemies, which we don't know how big nearby is, unfortunately. Nearby enemies' monsters' attack speed is at most 92% of base value. So if you've ever cast like temp chains on a monster, you kind of know what you're getting into here. The thing that I'm wondering, and I don't know this 100%, I will have to see, I'll have to look more deep into it and see people that understand action speed on monsters a little bit more, because I admittedly don't. If these action speed values can be interpreted as the new base value for them, this could be extremely powerful. So what I'm talking about here is like, if an enemy monster's action speed is at most 92%, if I apply temp chains and temp chains is reducing it by 20, is their new action speed going to be 72% or is it going to be 80%? Because this is a pretty big question and I'm not actually sure. So if anybody does know how this maybe happens in different parts of the game, let me know down in the comments. But if this does stack, it is an absolutely insane node. If it doesn't stack, it's still pretty solid. Now, the interesting thing about this node is that there is an additional bonus that you're getting here. Your action speed is at least 108% of base value. That means that anything that could remove your action speed, we're talking like freezes and such, anything that would reduce your action speed now cannot apply to you. So this does make you immune to mechanics like freeze, which is very, very strong. And now we're going to talk about the 3 notables at the bottom right, because I feel these are the defining notables of the Trickster now. So we'll start with Escape Artist. This is the old Escape Artist that we've always known about. 5 evasion rating per 1 maximum energy shield on helmet, and 1 energy shield per 6 evasion rating on body armor. This is the notable that makes you think, okay, I need to be energy shield and evasion on this character. That's going to be what I'm mainly focused on. So you'll be using a body armor with like multiple thousands of evasion. You'll be using a energy shield helmet with a couple hundred energy shield on it. This is just a solid defensive node that gives you some stats, and it is a cost to get to the nodes that are behind it. And this is the main thing about this ascendancy that you need to be aware of. You really want at least one of these next 2 nodes. And the cost of getting that node is going through Escape Artist. Escape Artist isn't amazing or anything, but it's one of those nodes where it's like, yeah, you gotta take it so that you can get access to the stuff behind it. Now let's talk about Soul Drinker first. Soul Drinker is the like generic notable that was for the Shadow previously. It was the one that you could get from Forbidden Flesh and Forbidden Flame. It was always kind of weird to me when I was looking at it, because I'm like, this kind of feels like a Trickster notable, if I'm going to be real with you. It doesn't really feel like just a generic Shadow notable. So what this does is, this is the energy shield equivalent of like Slayer Overleech, essentially. Now, the way that Overleech works is it essentially just makes it so that any leech that you do is not stopped when you reach full of whatever you're leeching, energy shield or life. This means that if you are getting a ton of leech going, you're getting like 1,000 to 2,000 leech happening per second. Normally the way that it works is that when you hit full life, that leech ends instantly and you have to reapply it after you take damage. With this, the way that it's going to work is that as you are doing damage, that leech is going to stack and it's going to be ready for you the moment that you need it, meaning that your energy shield is going to refill instantly upon taking any damage. And on top of this, it is just 2% of generic damage leeched as energy shield. Do keep in mind here that you are going to need to hit. You can't leech from damage over time unless it is specifically like a mechanic that does that. We're talking like Essence Drain. And it's going to be giving 20% increased attack and cast speed, which is pretty solid. That's a good amount of attack and cast speed. And you will always have it as long as you're hitting, since energy shield leech effects are not removed when energy shield is filled. A very powerful node if you are hitting pretty hard and you are based on energy shield, which you probably should be on this ascendancy. So a really solid node. And then we have the big node that I actually think is going to define the Trickster. So Spellbreaker, 20% chance to suppress spell damage is very powerful. Any additional chance to suppress spell damage is good because you want to stack this on the right side of the tree. It's pretty much necessary to not die if you are a right side of the tree build. It does give prevent 10% of suppressed spell damage while you're on full energy shield. Notably, this will be interesting when mechanics are able to pass your energy shield. So anytime that an ability is going to pass your energy shield completely, and if you're leeching or regenerating energy shield from the next line of this, you are most likely going to be on full energy shield. So this is actually pretty good for things like maybe a chaos spell that's going to go through your energy shield. If you're on full energy shield and you get hit by that chaos spell, you're going to get an additional 10% suppression from that. And then the final line is 50% chance for energy shield recharge to start when you suppress spell damage. This line is insane. So this means that if you get 100% chance to suppress spell damage, which you should, that means that 50% of the time that you get hit by spells, you are starting your energy shield recharge. So keep in mind, when you combine this with things like Wicked Ward, where energy shield recharge is not interrupted by damage if recharge began recently, you do get 40% less energy shield recharge rate. But when you combine it with things like this, it reminds me of things like the Devouring Diadem, like energy shield recharge start, because with Devouring Diadem, it has this line where it says 10% chance for energy shield recharge to start when you use a skill. This is really, really powerful, especially if you have a lot of energy shield. Like, this cannot be understated how powerful this is. It's a huge, huge defensive layer. The fact that the Trickster is going to be getting this recharge when it gets hit most of the time by spells is really solid, in my opinion. And on top of that, it doesn't require you to have Eldritch Battery to get use of the, like, chance for energy shield recharge to start when you use a skill. This is the most notable part of it, is that it does not require you to have Eldritch Battery anymore. So because of that, when the Trickster is using the energy shield to protect itself, and 50% of the time that you get by a spell, it's going to start that energy shield recharge, this is a good defensive layer. It's a very good defensive layer, and in my opinion, I feel like if you're going the Trickster, you're going to be taking Escape Artist and you're going to be taking Spellbreaker almost always. They're simply just too good to give up if you're going to play the Trickster as an energy shield type character. Now, looking at all of these nodes as a whole, what kind of builds do I think are going to be the ones that people play on this Ascendancy? I feel that we should be patient here. We should be patient with trying to do the Trickster too soon, because I feel like if you are a newer player or you're not someone that understands builds at a very conceptual level, you're probably going to jump into the Trickster and do okay, but I don't think that there's enough here for you to just generically be great no matter what. Because I feel that the Trickster is now, as Chris said it in the announcement, the equivalent of the champion for spellcasters. It's got a bunch of really solid generic defensive layers on it, but you're really going to need to understand how to scale a character's damage properly to be able to get enough damage to feel good on this character. It's not one of those ascendancies where it's just like, you do a bunch of damage just because you chose the ascendancy. You really got to understand, like, am I going to be doing things like scaling a bunch of alt ailments, or are you going to be stacking like frenzy charges? You have to understand that you're going to need to use alternative ways to scale your damage very heavily, because the ascendancy itself is not going to give you a ton of damage. That being said, it absolutely gives you a ridiculous amount of defenses, very, very, very solid recovery, and a bunch of really cool stuff. So I am excited about the Trickster, but be patient with this new Ascendancy. And that is going to be it for the video. The Trickster looks really solid. It does look very good, but please give it a little bit of time if you are not a like big brain build creator. This is going to be one of those slow burn Ascendancies, okay? It's going to be one of those ones where we're figuring things out over the course of the league. You'll probably see some of the more prolific build creators make some builds about this really, really early on, but just keep in mind, there's a lot that we need to explore with this Ascendancy. It looks like it's going to be very powerful, and I can't wait to try out some builds with it, but we're going to have to give it a little bit of time. So remember, boys, if you enjoy this content, make sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest videos, and stay safe out there in raid class, and I'll see you in 3.19 Lake of Kalandra.